20th anniversary of the Newburyport Literary Festival. This is also our 5th anniversary of the virtual festival, which of course was started by necessity, but I'm really excited to continue it so we can do fun events like this, writing workshops and bring people from all over the world to, virtually to Newburyport. So that's why we're continuing. We've got a fun event, but before we get going, I want to thank everyone who's been involved in the festival for the last 20 years. And that's from the steering committee, which is 100% volunteers, to our founding sponsors, the local banks, the Newburyport Bank, and the Institution for Savings. We also are sponsored by many of the Massachusetts cultural councils, the Mass Center for the Book, and a list of sponsors that I don't want to go through right now because it's super long, but you can find it on the website. And we're so appreciative to all of those sponsors, as well as the individual donators, because this festival is run on donations. I also want to give a plug to our local bookshops. As you know, yesterday was Independent Bookstore Day, and it's super important to support our indies. We honored the founder of Jabberwocky Books last night at an amazing ceremony in Newburyport. She's passing her bookstore on to her son and daughter-in-law. That's Jabberwocky and the bookshop about Beverly Farms. So I'm going to put the links in the chat. I also want to tell you where you can see Steve again. Steve Almond, who is here to lead us in this writing workshop, is an amazing writer, and he's written several books, and he loves teaching about writing. He has two events that are coming up. One is a no-nonsense survival guide for writers, and the other is a session on how to kickstart your muse. These are both available. I'm going to put the links in the chat so that you can check them out. And I think they should be great, just as great as this upcoming session. So without further ado, Steve, I'm going to turn it over to you. Thank you so much for being here, and I'm looking forward.
Right on. And thank you guys for being here as well, and Leslie for putting it together. Leslie, I do want to ask one thing, which is the webinar chat. I would love to be able to see people's comments, and I see that I'm limited just to host and panelists. So I don't know if there's a way to get participants in on that chat, but I'm not seeing the group chat, and I really want to see that because I would like people to put in the chat what they work on, what genres they write, and that just helps me, you know storytelling, but I kind of like to know how many
Yep.
nonfiction writers are in the room.
Absolutely. I'm gonna do that over here. We're gonna figure out
Okay.
my settings and make that happen.
Okay. And Jill says I am able to ask a question. And good. I'm very glad about that. And if I have to look in the Q&A, and that's where you guys want to put your put your comments. Actually, maybe let's do that. Rather than Leslie trying to figure out how to make the chat work, please put in the Q&A section
Okay, great.
just who you are, where you're zooming in from, and what you work on. That would be great. If you want to do that, I'm I'll check that out even as I'm talking with you about obsession, which is what I'm going to focus on, hopefully not too obsessively. Um, and the plan is that I'll talk a little bit about that and try to give you some examples of what I mean by obsession as an engine of creativity. And then I'm going to have you guys do some writing. I hope that's what you want, is to do some writing. And whether you're a fiction writer or nonfiction writer, the free write is going to operate with equal effectiveness. So here are some folks weighing in. Anne's up in beautiful Gloucester, which I love so much, and writing memoir, and Jill's right there in Newburyport. Awesome. Martha's also in Gloucester, writing fiction and enjoying the beautiful light. You know what I love about Gloucester is the Gloucester wave. People are so friendly up there. I live in Arlington where everybody's kind of got their mass hole on, but Gloucester has a different amplitude. Maybe something about being that close to the sea, being that close to the mother, makes everybody, in my experience, I could be misrepresenting it, but everybody seems a little bit more chill, a little bit more amicable. And there's this wonderful thing, the Gloucester wave, that if you're in a traffic situation, it's not clear who should go. There's this, what I call the Gloucester wave. People say, yeah, go ahead. Yeah, you first. That's fine. So I hope, Martha, that you're both a practitioner of and enjoyer of the Gloucester wave. Anne's Anne Elliott is here from Portland, Maine. I know you work on fiction. I enjoy it, and I'm so glad you're here. And Jane's a songwriter. Heard me on public radio. Well, okay, all right, wonderful. That still exists in this country. Enjoy it, support it. Rochelle's from the North Shore, working on memoirs, memories, and collections of short essays. Good. Be nice to have comments enabled. I agree. This is a little bit awkward, but we can make it work. It's cool. Whatever. As long as there's a dialogue. Grady's from Brooklyn, writing lots of lit fic and romance. Good on you, man. I want to write a romance. That sounds so delicious. You know what I like about romance, and it really does connect to what I'm going to talk about in a bit, which is just I think stories work like this. I think the unconscious question that readers are asking, oh, good. So Leslie says she thinks the chat is on and chat has been enabled. So there it is. So if you want to get off of the Q&A and go to the chat, that would be great. Thank you, thank you, Leslie, for making that happen. But what I love about romances and that genre is that it's the two questions that I'm always wondering about as a reader. And I think most people, when they enter story, they really have two basic questions. It's not the only two questions that they're wondering about, but I really do think they are the central questions. And those questions are really, really basic. They are, who do I care about in this story? And what do they care about? And that's, I think, for me, why I am so interested in discussing obsession as an engine of literary endeavor, storytelling, because in our lives we think about obsession as I think as something that's negative. When we say somebody's obsessed, sometimes we mean it in a positive way, but oftentimes what we're really saying is that people are sort of too into something. There's a sense of their being passionate, but also kind of stuck in stasis. I'm obsessed. I can't get past it. It's one of the few verbs that actually connotes an internal conflict all on its own. So when we say somebody's obsessed, we mean both that they're positively attached to something, and maybe we're also saying too attached to it. And when I think about obsessive texts, stories that are obsessive, what I mean is that its style might be obsessive. Lolita, Fire of My Loins, right? That there's a sort of obsessive quality to the way the story is told, but also that the plot turns on an obsession. And those two usually travel together, and they apply to fiction or nonfiction. But it's all rooted in those two questions. Who do I care about in this story, and what do they care about? And for me, this is why I love romance. The sooner these questions are answered, the happier the reader will be. The more inflamed the protagonist, the heroine's concerns are and passions, the deeper our gratification will run. We want from stories radical subjectivity. We want feelings that are unstoppable and crazed and shameless precisely because as we go about the business of responsible living and being dutiful friends and lovers and workers and parents and all the rest of it, we are depriving ourselves of these abject feelings almost constantly. To summarize, we want obsession. We want the utter domination of one's thoughts and feelings by a persistent desire, hopefully with calamitous results. That's the kind of sickos we are. Um, and as a parent, it is very clear to me. It's like every day, it is absolutely obvious that we are born into a state of obsession. Any of you who have kids or have encountered kids or even been a kid know this instinctually. When a baby or a small child or a toddler or a kindergartner or a teenager, when they want something, they want it obsessively and they are not negotiating about it. They want comfort, they want touch, they want milk, they want their diaper changed, they want a different kind of toast, whatever it is. They are obsessed with that until it is gratified or definitively refused to them. And then the matter isn't over. They hold on to that painful feeling as well. I'm thinking about many years ago, we had a picky eater, which is to say, our oldest child was obsessed with food and what foods were safe or unsafe. Maybe some of you are familiar with this. It's a kind of obsession. And she really only ate kind of the pea foods like pizza and pancakes and pasta and popcorn, and that was about it. So it was hard to get protein, that other pea, into her body. And so there was one thing that my partner Aaron could make, or that we could serve to Josie that would that would have protein, which was hummus. But it had to be mom's homemade hummus, and it had to be made by a special method and the right texture and all that. It had to look the right way. And one night, in a fit of true optimism, Aaron put paprika onto the homemade hummus, that bright, beautiful red spice. And we thought, okay, well, let's give it a shot. And anybody who has a picky eater knows exactly what happened. Josie reared back in alarm and said, "What is that?" And we said, that's paprika. It's wonderful. You'll love it. It's a wonderful spice. It's so delicious. Isn't it pretty, etc." And Josie said, "No, no paprika, no paprika." And because we're these sort of idiotic parents, Aaron sort of sliced the top offending layer of hummus off with a knife, the stuff that had the paprika on it, and kind of dolloped it into my mouth. And we thought to ourselves, okay, paprika gone, problem gone. Not the case, because now the paprika was up here and in here. It had migrated. And we spent about that evening, and I would say an additional week or so, really doing a deep dive on the sudden fear and phobia that Josie had developed about paprika. And she wanted to know where it came from and why it looked like that. And if there was any way to send UN level inspectors out to disable any further production of paprika in the world so it would not haunt her nightmares. And on the one hand, it was super fucking annoying and we were being driven up a wall. And on the other hand, I kind of retrospectively admire the stance that Josie was taking. It was an essentially literary stance because it was capable of focusing her attention in the midst of whatever distractions might have been going on. Her attention was focused with an incredible vehemence. And to me, that is where storytelling begins. It is in all art, really, but storytelling is what we're talking about this morning. It begins with your ability to arrest your attention in the midst of distraction. And nothing focuses the mind and heart like an obsession. That's literally, I believe, we're born into a state of obsession. And over the years, we are socialized out of it. People like Josie and me and the rest of us are told not to care so much about things, not to be such picky eaters, not to get our hearts so bent out of shape by a disappointment or a need that's not met or a want that's not met. And as a result, we kind of push our obsession down out of view. I'm interested to hear in the chat if this paradigm sounds at all familiar and plausible to you, right? That what we're doing is not getting rid of our obsession, but we're suppressing it. And to me, what that winds up doing is spring loading it with the force of suppression. We push it down. That doesn't make it go away. That actually gives it added power because now it has the power of being pushed down and hidden from view. And we're doing this constantly. We're told in order to be good students in school and good obedient children and good employees and good workers and good partners and good friends, we cannot care too much about things because those deep feelings are too disruptive. They're too much. They're extra. I don't think that we are sort of have become sort of screen addicted, superficial people. I think the reason that we're not reading as much and not making as much art or consuming that art is not because we're addicted to screens. It's because we've surrendered to one extent or another our capacity for sustained attention and the moral imagination that that kind of attention grants us. We've lost the perfectly childish conception of storytelling and reading, writing as a form of prayer. That's what I think. Um, I'm going to share a few examples of what I consider to be obsessive texts, but I should say that I'm not including much poetry, not because I have anything against poets. I love poets. I worship them. They're never going to make any money writing, and they still do it. Those are the dreams. And for the record, Song of Myself or Howl or any of Audre Lorde Cole or any of her other beautiful poems, those are openly, joyously obsessive texts. Same thing is true of, I think, good songwriting. I know there's some songwriters in the group, and certainly anybody who writes plays. I mean, Shakespeare's plays spring from obsessive feeling, jealousy, Othello, ambition, Macbeth, hormonal passion, Romeo and Juliet. There we are back to the romance. Eugene O'Neill is a factory of family obsession. How do we escape from the sorrow of our childhood? Can we ever escape? Willy Loman is brought low by his obsession with the heroic Even a modernist like Beckett, his most famous play, what does it hinge on? When is Godot going to get here? Where is Godot? This obsession with this figure who everybody's waiting to appear. And without that obsession, I would argue that it's going to be a pretty dull play. That's what's driving it. And if you look at most stories, I'll look at a few novels or think about a few novels. They are by and large the engine that moves the plot forward is obsession. We can go all the way back to Cervantes, right? That story begins Don Quixote with a normal guy, Alonso Quixano is his name, and he develops the obsession, the conviction that the world is out of chivalric order and that it's his job as the knight errant Don Quixote to put on pots and pans and to go out into the world and somehow save it, rescue it. And of course, he fails all over the place. And at the end of the second book, he is cured of his manic obsession with restoring the world's order. And he takes off his pots and pans and he lies down in bed and he dies. And he dies because when the obsession is over, the story is over. That's just how it works. That's what was driving it the whole time. And you can look at any number of classics. You know, the thrill of Jane Eyre resides in the title character's voracious drive to escape the privations of her youth. That's true of most of Dickens, if you think about it, all those orphans and Harry Potter for that matter. They're trying to improve their circumstances in the world, and the world's stacked against them, and they have to be obsessive and cunning and courageous in order to transcend the life that they've been born into and make a bigger life. The same thing is true of a book like Moby Dick. The whole thing is driven by this dude whose masculinity has been insulted, Ahab. A whale has bitten off his leg, and he is not going in search of anything other than retribution. It is a book driven by masculine doubt and the way that that is converted into cruelty and aggression and destructiveness. Stop me if this story sounds familiar. Lolita, right, is really just an episode of To Catch a Predator if you subtract that Humbert is obsessed with this love object. Yes, it's destructive, immoral, illegal, predatory, etc. But part of what hooks us into that book is that we too have had an object of desire that feels out of control and destructive, most of us. And it doesn't matter really what the style is, what the temperament. There can be books that are extremely restrained. I'm thinking about Ishiguro's The Remains of the Day. What a beautiful novel that is. Maybe one of my favorites. And that is told by our narrator, the butler Stevens, who is absolutely obsessed with dignity, the idea of dignity, his own dignity, that of his employer. And the book is told in a way that is sort of vibrating with his own regrets because he realizes, he knows deep down that this man who he served in the great house for so long was a Nazi sympathizer who was not a great man at all. And he also knows that he was deeply in love with his fellow servant, Mrs. Kenton, but he dared not act on that. And he's sort of obsessively going over and over again around his regrets. He can't stop telling us the story, even though it's a muted, restrained, almost asphyxiated kind of version of the story. He can't stop telling us that story. He's obsessed with it. Much of what drives us as readers through particular stories is the unconscious but powerful sense that the narrator cannot stop to telling us that story. They can't stop obsessing. If the narrator could stop, why should we go on? If it's just a matter of discretion, hey, there are other things to do on the schedule. We have to feel that sense of urgency. That's why we're turning to literature, to experience those extreme feeling states of which a responsible life is depriving us almost always. I want to just say, as I'm gallivanting on here, if questions are coming up for you, please put them in the chat, and I promise you I will keep my eye on the chat. Mark says, hope to hear your thoughts. Read Denial and Repressing Obsession, result of destruction of that denial through epiphany. Well, yeah, I mean, it sounds like you're answering your own question. A lot of what we're looking for in stories are people who are in one way or another confronting stuff that is buried inside of them, internal conflicts and obsessive feelings that are expressing themselves in out of control, destructive ways. And the hope is that by the end of the story, they've cured everything, but they have some deeper understanding of, they're able to purge the emotion that has taken residence within them. Um, I'm thinking about a story like, well, certainly um, uh, uh, um, the beautiful Frank O'Connor story, Guests of the Nation. You know, that is a story about some young soldiers during the Troubles, the war between England and Ireland after World War One, and these two young Irish guys, young guys who are sort of been conscripted into the army. They take prisoner a couple of young British guys, and they're all in their early 20s, and they basically just play cards and talk about whether God exists and heaven and so forth. And then suddenly, a couple of Irish prisoners of war are killed, and they are told to go kill their friends. And the story is written from many, many years later. One of these Irish veterans is recalling having to go out into the bog and kill these friends of his. And I guess what I would say, Mark, in response to that question is that's what people write about. They write about what they can't get rid of by other means. In this case, it's the extraordinary guilt and sorrow and just trauma that this guy has carried around for 30 years, remembering and not being able to forget this terrible moment where he had to kill his friends and how it felt afterwards to have done such a thing. That feeling, that experience has never left him. And I think that's what people write about. They write about what they can't get rid of by other means. The reason it's sticking around is because it has business with you. I don't know the exact nature of the epiphany or the revelation, how much people will really be able to understand their experience. But the point of the story is to engage with that bewilderment that is not going away. Okay, let's see. Okay, good, Mark. All right, let me just say a few more things before I get you guys writing. One of the things that's important to understand, well, let me share with you a little bit of what I think of obsessive writing. I'm thinking about, in this case, the Margaret Duras. It's a novel, but it's really autofiction. It's kind of a memoir. And it's a story about by the writer Margaret Duras, French writer, who is recalling her childhood as a French girl in colonized Indochina. And she writes with this incredible, ravishing bluntness about the violence and moral lassitude of her family and this volatile love affair that she instigates at age 15 with a wealthy Chinese man who's about twice her age. And here is the points of view in the novel shift, but I want to share just a little bit of the prose because it's so delightful. I think I can do that, hopefully. Let me see if I can do screen share. I could read it to you, but I prefer to let you see the prose. Here it is. Good. I can't really remember the days, Margaret Duras writes. The light of the sun blurred and annihilated all color, but the nights I remember them. The blue was more distant than the sky, beyond all depths, covering the bounds of the world. The sky for me was the stretch of pure brilliance crossing the blue, that cold coalescence beyond all color. Sometimes it was in Vin Long. When my mother was sad, she'd order the gig and we'd drive out into the country to see the night as it was in the dry season. I had that good fortune, those nights, that mother. The light fell from the sky in cataracts of pure transparency, in torrents of silence and immobility. The air was blue. You could hold it in your hand, blue. The sky was the continual throbbing of the brilliance of the light. The night lit up everything, all the country on either bank of the river as far as the eye could reach. Every night was different. Each one had a name as long as it lasted. Their sound was that of the dogs, the country dogs baying at mystery. They answered one another from village to village until the time and space of the night were utterly consumed. Holy fucking shit. Let us stand in awe of obsession, of utter consumption, of the time and space of the night utterly consumed. That's what we're after, utter consumption. It sounds as a literary substrate really lucrative, but the real time experience for the writer is this disorderly rush of thought and feeling and detail. Duras is managing it so well that it's completely immersive. It's like falling into a vivid dream. But sentences like the ones that she's writing are actually deceptively hard to write. They mimic thought, which is this very dense and associative process. And in the wrong hands, that kind of prose can become hopelessly mangled, or worse yet, it can begin to reflect the author's infatuations with language rather than the character's experiences and preoccupations. What we're hearing in that Duras passage is what the character was experiencing, these intense sensual experiences of being out in the night and the color of the sky and the sound of the dogs. But oftentimes, in our insecurity and our desire to dazzle the reader, we forget that they just want to know who we care about and what they care about. We think, oh, we got to prove how entertaining we are, or they'll wander off to Netflix or something. And so we get our writing starts to reflect our own anxieties and our own infatuations with language rather than the characters' preoccupations and obsessions. And that's a fair summary of what most of my failed novels have sounded like. The other risk to obsessive prose is impossible to avoid. An obsessive text is, by its nature, hopelessly biased. And this bias comes at the cost of perspective. We're left without a reliable guide. And this is why so many novels about obsessives are written by secondary characters, right? My Brilliant Friend, the wonderful Elena Ferrante book, or Gatsby, or The Bluest Eye. Those are told, the stories are told by characters who are capable of sympathizing with the obsessive while offering insight. And that insight comes from their distance. They're able to see things a bit more clearly. This is why Ishmael tells the story of Ahab, or why Nick Carraway tells the story of Gatsby, why Marlowe tells the story of Kurtz. They need that secondary character who sympathizes and understands the obsessive and what, but is a person of thought and reflection, not just action. An obsessive narrator generates tension simply by holding forth, because they're always, I believe, human beings are always telling two stories about themselves. And Mark was getting at that, getting at this in his question. There's one about who we want to believe we are. We put that on Facebook and Instagram, sort of shining up, airbrushing our experience. That's who we want the world to believe we are. And then there's this other story that literature is always trying to get at, which is the story of who we know ourselves to be underneath it all. Nearly all the humiliating events in our lives and much of the best prose arises from the collision of those two stories. And with an obsessive narrator, the author's role is not to protect or malign the accused. The goal is simply to transcribe those moments that offer us the greatest insight into the hero's psyche and their heart. And that doesn't have to be a litany of primal scenes and family secrets and so forth. I love the book The Mezzanine, the Nicholson Baker book. It has great pathos, but it's about the narrator's obsession with like straws, drinking straws, and shoelaces, and all this minutia. What makes it interesting is his obsession and his utter consumption in those little objects. What matters is the quality of attention paid to the subject, not the ardor. That's what I would say. Um, Okay, I want to let's see. Let's give one example, just one more example that's a nonfiction example. Then I want to get you guys writing. You guys will know this, I think many of you. We're just in the world of Joan Didion here. Okay, this is just the beginning of goodbye to all that. It is easy to see the beginnings of things and harder to see the ends. Oh, let me see if I can call this up for you uh, uh, so you guys can actually see this on the screen. Sorry, I'm reading from a draft that's all marked up here. But let me see. Here we go. This will just take me a second. There we go. Okay, here we go. It is easy to see the beginnings of things and harder to see the ends. I can remember now with the clarity that makes the nerves in the back of my neck constrict when New York began for me, but I cannot lay my finger upon the moment it ended, can never cut through the ambiguities and second starts and broken resolves to the exact place on the page where the heroine is no longer as optimistic as she once was. When I first saw New York, I was 20 and it was summertime, and I got off a DC 7 at the old Idlewild temporary terminal in a new dress, which had seemed very smart in Sacramento, but seemed less smart already, even in the old Idlewild temporary terminal. And the warm air smelled of mildew, and some instinct programmed by all the movies I had ever seen and all the songs I had ever read about New York, all the songs I had ever heard about New York, informed me that it would never be quite the same again. In fact, it never was. Sometime later, there was a song on the jukeboxes on the Upper East Side that went, "But where is the schoolgirl who used to be me?" And if it was late enough at night, I used to wonder that. I now know that almost everyone wonders something like that sooner or later, and no matter what he or she is doing. But one of the mixed blessings of being 20 and 21 and even 23 is the conviction that nothing like this, all evidence to the contrary notwithstanding, has ever happened to anyone before. I mean, I could go on, but I'm going to stop there. But again, just delicious, absolutely delicious, propulsive. Somebody says, Martha, yeah. And that's the feeling with obsessive writing, is that there is a kind of a sense of urgency that arises from, and this is really when people say, when do you know writing is working? When do you know you're in a good flow state? It's working when you're more interested in telling the story than whether you're telling it well. And that's the quality that we can hear in really great prose. It's egoless. It's completely focused on the character's experience and not the writer's anxieties. And the writer's, am I smart enough? Am I eloquent enough? Am I funny enough? Am I witty enough? All that garbage. Those voices are impossible to get rid of, but to the extent you can, you want the story to be the source of your obsession and the stuff that your characters are obsessing over, which is sort of a sublimation of your own obsessions. People sometimes say, oh, well, I don't write autobiographical work. And I always want to say, well, then where does it come from? If it's any good, it's got to be coming from the deepest part of you. Maybe it's in fictional disguise, but it's still there underneath it all. You can look at Didion's essays. It's really just a compendium of moments. Goodbye to All That is really just a compendium of the moments from her New York years that she's been unable to forget. There's a larger point that we age, that we get wiser, but we're usually sort of mugged of our hope in the process, that kind of thing. There's a theme and a set of ideas, but much of the body of the essay is really about particular moments that she's been unable to get rid of by other means, that she's obsessed with. The feeling of peak New York, eating a peach at Columbus Circle with the wind coming up and the smell of garbage and perfume on the air, and just that feeling of I'm here, I've arrived. Or the light that comes through the golden curtains that she hangs, hoping that will cast this sort of golden light onto her life, and the way those curtains get tangled in the rain and sort of mildewed and soggy. And it's sort of like, wow, that's kind of what New York was for her. It started with a lot of hope and it ended with a lot of wisdom, but disappointment too, sense of disappointment. I'm constantly imploring my students to pay special attention to anything they can't forget. If an image or an interaction or a sensation or a snatch of dialogue snags in your consciousness, it bears investigation. And that's true of important relationships as well. Okay, I want to get you guys writing. And so I want to sort of skip to the end here. I'll be teaching a number of classes that are organized like this, where I speak on a particular subject, secrets and lies, friendship, sort of our sexual lives. And for me, the most exciting part is getting people writing and then learning off of that writing. And again, very informal, just giving yourself 15 or 20 minutes to work on something. My sense in my own career is that I have inevitably, when I flame out on one or another of my big failed novels, I return to almost inevitably something that I've been obsessed with for many years. My moral, complicated relationship to football as a fan, and also somebody who feels deeply guilty and ashamed of worshiping such a violent, destructive, misogynistic, whatever kind of game. I turned that over for years before I wrote Against Football. My obsession with candy and the unconditional pleasure and childhood transgression of what a piece of candy is and has been in my life. Um, my obsession with what happened in the 2016 election. I kind of went crazy. I was in the middle of a novel and I said, I'm not going to be able to focus on this. I need to explain to my kids and explain to myself, how did this happen? How did we elect this cruel, sadistic person who's just doesn't care about anybody other than himself? How did it happen? And to do that, I was obsessed, and I had to sort of I had to explain it to myself through the lens of literature and storytelling. And I wasn't going to be able to get to whatever the next project was until I'd moved through those obsessions. That's the most exciting part of the obsession, is that that is the part that you don't understand. You know that you're obsessed, but you aren't always able to step back and track what that obsession was doing for you, what it arose from, and what it might have been doing for you. For instance, my obsession with candy, I realized in writing Candy Freak, was really about being a sad, lonely person, about in childhood needing a path from despair. And I wrote Candy Freak when I was in a very depressed state. And it was, for me, I was returning to this kind of primal childish pleasure that had been one source of dependable happiness, and it had also been linked to the deeper feeling of feeling sad and isolated. Well, that wasn't what I set out to do when I wrote Candy Freak. I just thought I'll be able to visit a bunch of chocolate factories and it'll be really fun and giddy and so forth. But wrapped in that chocolate and nuts and nougat was a story about depression. That's what I love about obsession, is that it takes us in directions that we weren't expecting. And it forces us to recognize, or impels us to recognize, things that we might not have recognized unless we pressed deeply into that urgent set of feelings. I believe anybody who writes about the stuff that matters to them most deeply, whether it's in fiction or nonfiction, and who does so in the genuine effort to reveal truth, is going to find an audience. But regardless of that, you'll feel unburdened of the glorious secret of who you really are. To me, that's what we're really after as storytellers. Okay, here's the prompt, and I'm going to give you guys 20 minutes, and then we'll come back, and we'll come back at the top of the hour. It would be 10 o'clock on the East Coast, and we'll just, I'm going to put my email in the chat, and hopefully one or two of you will be brave enough, or maybe half a dozen of you will be brave enough to send these along, because I'd like to read them and learn off of them a little bit. Here's what I want you to do. I want you to think about the most persistent desire that you had as a kid, the most persistent obsession. Could even actually be a phobia. It doesn't have to be a desire. It could be a toy or a TV show, a kind of food, a band, a brand of cereal, a color. Your job is just to tell us about that obsession, how it took root, what pleasures or terrors it yielded, the rituals and relics that obtained around it, what memories leap to mind. At some point, you may want to step back and tell us about what else was going on in your life. That's probably relevant. And whichever obsession feels the most embarrassing, that to admit, that's the one that is the most alive and the most deserving of your literary attention. I'm going to put all that in the chat. So there is your prompt. And just write for 20 minutes or so. And I'm going to give you my email address as well. It's, wait, Steve Almond Joy at Gmail. And just when you're done, if you're feeling brave, send it along, because I would like to take a look at these and read a few of them. I'll pop back on in about 20 minutes and say, hey guys, finish up. But please don't worry about the prose here. I don't want you to just write in fragments or bullet points. I want you to write in actual sentences, but don't sweat how the prose sounds. I want you focused on your obsession. I want you to go back there and tell me about it. And it could be Cabbage Patch Kids, or it could be, the sitcom Will and Grace, whatever it is. You're the world's leading expert on it. And I love to hear people talk about stuff that they really love. That's what I found in Candy Freak, is that people were so interested in my particular memories of the way a particular candy bar tasted, or what the racks in my local candy shops looked like, and how much everything cost, and what I could get for $1. I love that stuff because I know what my hero cares about, and they care about it deeply. And that's what I'm plugging into, not what the particular object of the obsession is, but that quality of utter consumption, of sustained attention. Okay. Can you post the email, please? Yeah, I tried to do that, and I'm going to do it one more time. It's stevealmondjoy@gmail.com, Rochelle. It's right there. Um, and so maybe, Leslie, if you could make,
Yeah, you're also the chat settings are so annoying. Sorry,
okay.
but you're also just chatting to me and you.
Okay. So will you post my
Yep,
email, and
I
I'll put
will.
it, okay.
Yep,
I'm going to try to answer also. So it's for those of you, it's Steve Almond Joy, my name all run together, Steve Almond Joy at gmail.com. And I think Leslie is going to post that to everybody.
yep. I am. I just posted the prompt again, and I'm about to post the email.
Right on. Okay, guys, I'll see you guys in about 20 minutes. Have fun. I order you to have fun. A few people have been brave enough to send them along, and so I want to go ahead and take a look at them together. And please continue to send them if you haven't. Susan asked, can we send them later? I write by longhand. And the bad news here, Susan, is that I can't look at them later. I could say disingenuously, yes, of course, etc. I'll have time. I won't. But I will say that I do teach this kind of class, and I'm teaching a quartet of them about secrets and lies, about writing sex scenes, about writing about friendship, writing out about anger, and they all operate the same way, where I give a little talk and then a prompt, and then we take a look at the writing. And those, I think that Leslie will put a link to those. Unfortunately, just because of the nature of how chaotic my life is, I only get to look at a certain number in class. So for those of you, again, I apologize because I know some people like to write longhand, and good on you for that. I just didn't want to make a promise that I couldn't keep. Okay, let's take a look at what people came up with. I see them coming in, which is fantastic. And let's go ahead and take a look at old Scott Baio. Boy, I haven't thought about him for a while. Let's see. This is Beth. She says, as a preteen girl, I was obsessed with Scott Baio. I was surrounded by brothers and their friends and mine, but Scott Baio Chachi was the perfect yin to my yang. I dedicated a whole wall in my bedroom to his Tiger Beat photos. I fantasized about meeting him, getting swept away together. I was his missing ingredient. What a line. I was his missing ingredient. He was mine. We both had Maltese dogs. Better yet, his was a girl, mine a boy. How perfect. He was dark, exotic, charming. I was white, earthy, and serious. Plus, he was beautiful. I could stare at him all day. It was meant to be, Scott and I. If only I wasn't stuck in plain old West Virginia middle class humdrum world. Well, nothing came of Scott Baio. I grew up, I got out of West Virginia. I found my voice and my path little by little. No help from Scott. All these years later, it turns out Scott Baio is, well, a dumbass. What do you know? He was never sweet or charming, but an opportunistic leech, a conservative right wing Republican. He got ugly, and now he's a Trumper, for God's sakes. How did it all go so wrong? Go figure. I imagine it's because he was a catalyst for me, a projection of what I wanted to be myself: exotic, extraordinary, charming. Well, still not those things, but I am authentic, and that is exotic enough and beautiful. Scott Baio was fake, hollow, and lackluster all along. Go figure. Terrific piece of writing, Beth. Such energy. And I hope you can see how, at least in the initial sweep of the passion for Scott Baio, whoever it is, whatever it is, I'm just right in. I know who I care about, Beth. I know what she cares about. Scott Baio is tremendous energy to that. And I love this, that fantasy of, most of the time our fantasies are more powerful than kind of what we're left with in reality. And to have all those brothers around and so forth. But Scott Baio, and this is what I really love about the piece, Beth, is the stuff about criticizing him for being a Trumper. To me, that's, I can get that on cable TV. I don't, I get it and I hear it and I agree with it even, but it's not what's exciting. It's not what's particular to you. What's really important is that moment of self-reflection. I imagine it's because he was a catalyst for me, a projection of what I wanted to be myself. I wanted to get out of West Virginia. I wanted to get out of the humdrum, middle class, dull life. I wanted something bigger and more exciting. That's the allure of Scott Baio. And that really has nothing to do with his politics or what he's up to. That's the idea of this person is the missing ingredient. With him, he's a catalyst for me. You put it perfectly. That's ultimately the meaning of that obsession. And I love that, Beth, you were able to get to it. I also want to urge people, if you would, sorry, I want to urge people to put comments in the chat so that we can all, so that everybody who's brave enough to have submitted a piece can you just, receive the applause and um, acclaim's the wrong word, but you know what I mean, the positive attention and feedback from being able to write a piece. It just comes popping out. There had been Scott Baio for years, and it was sort of, okay, you could say it was a Tiger Beat crush, but it had a deeper meaning. And what Beth was able to get to through this obsession was the deeper meaning. I wanted a bigger life. And Scott Baio, for me, was the link to that. He was my missing ingredient. I love it. Great job, Beth. Oh, good. Some people have, okay, let's see. Um, okay, let's see. And let me go to, um, good, you guys are, let me see if we can get to another obsession here. Okay, Anne, I'm going to read yours. Here we go. And to get through as many of these as we can because they're really exciting for me to read. I hesitate to write about them because I'm afraid to type the word. My computer will see me typing it, and then the next thing you know, I'll get ads for keeping them away. I don't dare type the word into a search engine. I'm a gardener, and it might help me. The engine will send me terrifying pictures. In conversation, I refer to them as bad guys because saying the word might make one of them appear. I had one as a pet when I was about 10. I caught it in my tree outside and fed it leaves in an aquarium, then another to keep him company. The two fuzzy caterpillars grew as they ate from the apple branch. Funny how my heart still quickens when I utter the creature's name. Wow, not their given names, which they surely had, which I have forgotten. What I do remember, they were fat and cute, but also little monsters. They were tent caterpillars, and it was a big year for them in Seattle. I could see their siblings' webs in the tops of the trees. Wow, what an image. And occasionally a young tree would lie on the ground, killed from the weight of them. I was told if I fed my pets well, they would make cocoons, then emerge from them with wings, but they died. They shrank and fell to the bottom of the aquarium. After all my attention, feeding, staring, I was helpless to keep them alive. I should have left them up there in the tree with their families. Wow, what pathos. Ever since, the sight of a caterpillar is pure terror. The rest of that summer, they crawled on every window screen, strutted across every sidewalk. I kept my eyes peeled for them to make sure I am not taken by surprise. If you turn over a leaf, there might be one on the back. If you let down your guard, the next thing you know, you'll be surrounded by them. Like any infestation, suddenly they will be everywhere. You and your leaves will be helpless against them. I sighted one last summer in our backyard. It was a brown woolly one, a solo traveler. To my relief, I alerted my husband a bad guy was present and told him the location. I asked him to kill it. Please kill it. How? He asked. Put it in this plastic bag, I replied. Then you can just smash it and put it in the garbage. My husband once woke up a vegetarian. He had had a dream about a monkey and woke up a vegetarian. No more killing. And here I had asked him to kill this harmless solo caterpillar just because I was too afraid to work in my garden. He did as I was asked, but he told me he did not feel good about it. I found myself weeping for the rest of the day. I had asked him to do my dirty work, to kill the creature I was afraid to kill myself, who probably didn't deserve to be killed. Will I have the courage to deal with it by myself next time? I don't dare tell people I'm scared of them. I had a fall residency in Vermont, and the trees were full of them. Residencies are for walking and thinking, and I covered myself for fear one would fall on my body. I no longer scream and leap across the room. I can manage to calmly walk away. Last summer, my dog found one on the green belt and nudged it with his nose. I pulled them away. The bugs survived. I hate them, but will not muster the courage to step on them. Wow, what a fascinating piece of writing. And it begins as a mission of mercy, but it kind of morphs into a revulsion, a kind of murderous revulsion, like I have to eliminate them. It's them or me. But what's interesting about it is that in the end, or in the beginning, I should say, it's sort of you want to take them into your care, and you give them all this attention and food and so forth. And you're right, I was helpless to keep them alive. I should have left them up there in the tree with their families. Ultimately, I think you feel guilty, like it was an abduction. I took them away and I killed them. But what's interesting is that in the reliving of it, whatever it is that's in operation there, guilt or remorse, or makes you like have to kind of eliminate them, get rid of them. The idea that they exist in the world with you is unbearable, to the point that you would ask your sweet partner who's a vegetarian to do your dirty work. I mean, this is the essence of obsession. It's totally fascinating to me. And we could say, oh, well, this is a silly or childish thing. No, this is primal. There's Anne going on a retreat. She's supposed to be thinking and being expansive and brave and so forth. And all she could do is think about those caterpillars in the treetops and cover herself and kind of and when she does, when her husband does kill one, she cries for the rest of the day. It still matters. It's still alive. The obsession is still alive. It still has meaning. I just want to hear more about this. It makes me want to keep listening to this narrator. Funny how my heart still quickens when I utter the creature's name. It's amazing. I love that image of them, that sort of at the tops of the trees in their webs. And it's also interesting to think about, I think, as a kind of a metaphor, this particular creature, because it is more worm-like and disgusting, but then it goes into a cocoon and it emerges into sort of a beautiful diaphanous creature that I don't think is as frightening to people. So it's fascinating to just think about that as well. All right, we have time for one more. Anne, that was fantastic. Really, really wonderful. Let's go ahead and see if I can do one more here before we have to put it in the ditches. Okay, let's see. Here we go. This will be a quickie. This is Catherine. And thank you guys all for having done them. I'm sorry I can't respond to each one. I really would wish to. And I hope that maybe I'll see you in another class. And I promise you, if that's the case, we'll have they're a little bit longer and we have more time to go over the pieces that people write. I make a point. My sister and I, writes Catherine, were obsessed with horses when I was a girl. It's a common obsession for young girls, and I'm not sure why. There's the usual trope of the stand-in of the horse's warm back for sex, that girls just want them pulsing, that pulsing alive thing between their legs. But fuck, that doesn't ring true to me or my experience at all. It sounds more like it's coming from some deranged man somewhere who doesn't know what to do with his own obsession with young girls and the pulsing alive thing between his own legs. Thank you, Catherine. Truth bomb dropped. Anyway, we were obsessed with horses and all things horse. Our obsession ran to taking out every book in the local library with a horse or pony theme, of which there were many. Misty of Chincoteague being one of our favorites, but also the wonderful Black Beauty and my own personal favorite pony for the winter. When we weren't reading, we were galloping around the yard, pretending to be horses, nickering and neighing, nuzzling one another as we galumphing along, as if we ourselves had one of those magical velvety noses that snort soft warm air from pockety soft nostrils lined with silky whiskers that tickle as you timidly reach up to stroke them. You hear the poetry in this. It's just delightful. Those wondrous snouts, scary though, with all those teeth that you have to carefully avoid because they occasionally, you don't know when or why, can nip you. Ouch. It's almost like a poem. It's so delightful, Catherine. And you just take us right in there. You can feel that the prose, like a horse, it sort of starts at a trot, those shorter sentences, and then it really starts to canter, and then it really starts to gallop. We weren't reading, we were galloping around the yard, pretending to be horses, nickering and neighing, nuzzling one another as we lumped along, as if we ourselves had one of those magical. It's really, and I love that when the prose, the sentence structure starts to mimic the feeling and the activity that's being written about. I also think that you very deftly move from kind of the wrong set of associations or assumptions about the obsession, oh, little girls and horses and whatever, and you sort of call it out, but then you move on to what your version of that passion was and bring us inside the embodied experience. There's something very soft and nurturing, and it's quite beautiful to hear the precision. Remember, we talked about writing arising from obsession, that is the arrest of attention in the midst of distraction. Reading a piece like this and the others we've looked at, there's that sense, whatever it is, Scott Baio or caterpillars, or in this case, horses, of this writer is more interested in conveying this experience than whether they're doing it well or flashy images. It's very beautiful and precise writing. That is the arrest of attention in the midst of distraction. That's why I think obsession is the engine of literary creativity, to be able to describe with precision and a certain amount of love what horses mean to Catherine, what she loves about them, their nostrils, their whiskers, the way in which they're big and caretaking, but also a little scary. And I think that is actually a lot of what is the attraction, is that they're these big, beautiful, gentle animals, and they're also really huge. There's something about being able to live side by side with them or interact with them that is kind of a mastery of our own fears and anxieties about big, monstrous, or big, powerful things in our lives. It's just a beautiful piece of writing. And actually, I just want to say in general, thank you guys. Great job. Anne Elliott remembers Misty of Chincoteague, or however it's pronounced. And I love that you have those books, or you're recalling those books. And I hope you guys will run over to Jabberwocky or another independent bookstore and grab them. And I want to thank Leslie for putting this all together in the Newburyport Festival. Thank you, Leslie. And again, I hope I'll see you guys in a class down the road. That would be just fantastic. And again, I really apologize if I didn't get you your piece, but I will. I'll look at my day and see whether I might be able to take a look at a few of them. I can't promise, but I'll definitely try. It was such a delight to spend time with you guys.
Thank you so much, Steve. This has been awesome, and I loved hearing those pieces. That it's amazing what people can come up with in such a short time, and also the differences between them. Horses and Scott Baio and caterpillars. I actually was thinking about. I was writing longhand about Kirk Cameron, my own crush.
Right
Had sort
on.
of the same vibe. So
He's
thank
been
you,
waiting for his
everyone.
moment.
Thank you again for coming today. We'll see you again soon. Take care.